Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode. Now, before we get into this, I'd just like to update you on the many different things that we've got going on that are all very exciting. Now, this podcast is released on YouTube and also your usual podcast app. I hope you're following along on those platforms. And we've also recently launched a Something to Say YouTube channel where people are sharing their stories via video format. And we've also extracted the audio for the podcast version too. So you can find that under Something to Say Official. And of course, as you know, we're on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. So go and search us there and press follow on all those platforms, because social media will not show you everything that we release. We're posting every day. So I want you to stay informed and stay equipped and stay up to date with all the latest announcements that we make on those platforms. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode where we are bringing on experienced guests who are doing incredible work in different areas of this topic, because we've all got a goal, and that is to understand this in a more deeper way, understand what methods are available to us to prevent this from happening to children in the first place. And that is our major goal here on this podcast. And that's why every time I come across a guest that I feel has something interesting to say, I want to just have the conversation. And I know lots of people that listen to this podcast enjoy these conversations. So today I've brought on Christoffer and Alison onto the podcast, and they're going to explain more of the work that they do. But first of all, thank you both for coming on and having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having us here.
Brilliant. So, Christoffer, could I please ask you to start with just introducing myself and the audience to the work that you're doing?
Sure. We're a research group located at Karolinska Institutet in Stockholm, Sweden. And we're around 10 to 15 people working in international collaborations. In total, I think we're around 40 researchers actually in different countries. And our work is to try and prevent child sexual abuse and exploitation by reaching out to those individuals who are worried about their urges towards children, to see if our interventions such as psychotherapy and medicines can help them from refraining from acting out their fantasies. So we've done that now for a decade, and we have some really interesting and nice results, I think, this far.
Okay, amazing. Sounds incredible. You mentioned that you've been doing it for a decade, so I can only imagine 10 years ago, the conversation around this area was just not being had at all, compared to now. I mean, even now it's not really being had. But can you tell us a little bit about the change you've seen in that decade?
Well, from my perspective, I think one of the major changes is that people now feel have a feeling of like hope that it is possible to make a change, that preventing child sexual abuse is actually possible. There are so many convincing examples now, and we start to add up a number of relevant studies indicating the same conclusion, that it is possible to prevent child sexual abuse and exploitation.
Yes, and I love the way that you use the word hope, because that's the word that we should use. Because otherwise, I believe if we just sit there and say that people are evil and they will do evil things, I mean, that's not working towards the prevention of the crime actually from happening. That's not very productive. And I was an engineer before I did this work online. And so I'm all about problem solving. I'm all about looking at a structure or a mechanics and finding the weak points and making sure that it doesn't fail moving forward. And so I like the approach that you've explained there. Alison, can I ask you if you could introduce yourself too, and what part you have to play in this work?
Yeah, so my name is Alison McMahon. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here at Karolinska Institutet as a doctoral student. And I've been working as the project coordinator for Prevent It Too. I've actually been working with Christoffer now for almost over 5 years. So that's quite exciting.
Amazing.
So I was there in the beginning with Prevent It One, working as a therapist in that project. And then when that concluded, I led the manual revisions, and now I'm a coordinator for Prevent It Two in English, the global English version of that.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And you've mentioned this is it Prevent 2
Yeah,
a couple of
Prevent It
times?
Two.
Okay, is that one of the parts of the work or the research?
Yes, so Prevent It Too is a cognitive behavioral therapy that we have been developing for individuals who are at risk of committing child sexual abuse, either online or offline. And so the first version was for active offenders who were consuming child sexual abuse material online. And then at the point of revision, we decided we wanted to act even more preventatively. So we designed the Prevent It Too program to offer help to individuals who were just worried about their urges toward children, their sexual urges toward children. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So my mind would like to talk a little bit more about like what even would the techniques be um with that particular part of the program. But just before we do that, or if we do that, can I just ask, Christoffer, is this an area that you think is worthwhile going into for this conversation, or is there something else that you think we should talk about first?
No, it's definitely something we can talk about. I mean, it's an ongoing trial, and we're actually reaching out to people as we speak. We want more English-speaking participants, so it is a relevant topic, I think. But if you want to, we can also put it in a larger context and talk about other, like previous and planned studies as well.
Yeah, okay, let's do that first, and then yeah, let's do that first. That's better. So if you could, can I hand over to you then to talk about it in a more broader sense?
Yeah, sure. The idea to this Prevent It program actually came from the clients themselves. In the previous study, in which we tested a pharmaceutical, we also did in-depth interviews because we noticed that most of the clients are in their mid-30s when they come to seek our help. However, they've had their thoughts around children since their teenage years. So it means that they have been walking around often very alone with their thoughts around 20 years before they decide to seek help. So we want to know, how can we make them seek at an earlier age? Because during these 20 years, much can happen. So we asked them, how do you think we should do to make you come into treatment like much earlier? And then several of them mentioned, don't sit at your offices waiting for us to come to you because there are so many barriers. You should come to where we are instead. Okay, so where are you? And then they started to explain and describe to me all of these online dark web forums where they
Wow.
meet and chat and exchange child sexual abuse material and talk and fantasize together about hurting children. So we decided to set up a project in which we entered these forums and started to interact with them and invite them to online anonymous therapy globally. So that's
Wow.
where we started. And now we see the results. You know, you should listen to the client, because now the clients we get, they are instead in the 20s instead. So they come to us after only a few years of thoughts around children. So we have a much better opportunity now to actually do something to prevent children from being harmed and from helping them to, have a much better lives themselves too.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so when you go to these places where people who have these thoughts in their head are communicating with others with the same thoughts, you are communicating with them in some way, and saying, look, we are these people and we are here to help you. Please understand that this support will be valuable to you to not commit the crime in the first place. So then people are seeing you, however you're doing that with them on the dark web, and then they're approaching you. But is there an ethics issue here? Because you've witnessed them talk about that type of thing. Is there a mandatory reporting thing? Like, how do you get around that?
There's a lot of ethical and legal challenges. We were also the first who actually did this, that entered with like medical research into these forums and did it globally and anonymously and all. So we have had several challenges to try and solve and get our heads around what is actually the best thing to do here. What is like, is this really, you know, good from a child? What we've decided is to take it all from a child rights perspective. So we collaborated with an advisory board with members from child rights background, but also from law enforcement background and prison and probation services, like representatives, as well as representatives from the client group. So we've had like an advisory board with all these voices around the table at the same time. So in dialogue with them, we've developed this project. But I think we actually managed to find like a way through all of this that is ethically sound, that is in line with international guidelines for conducting research, and also that is legally correct. We do follow like our national legislation when it comes to mandatory reporting if we get to know about ongoing crimes or crimes planned in the near future. And we also make notifications of concerns to social authorities if we get to know of an identified child that is at risk of being harmed. So we adhere to all these legislations, but we still manage to get these people to actually seek our help, and to because in the, you know, if we take away all the complicated stuff around, it is a human being suffering from an ailment, psychological ailment that he has not chosen himself, who wants to have help from like a professional, and we provide that help.
Yes.
And we do it in a way that protects children and also the adult man with his problems, who he often has the suicidal thoughts and lots of anxiety. So there is a reason for him to seek our help. And he in the end of the program, most often he says that he feels helped, and that the risk or any ongoing behavior against children has reduced significantly or stopped totally.
Okay, amazing. Alison, are you involved in that part of the project?
Yeah, so with the darknet recruitment.
Yes.
Yes, so under the Prevent It 1 trial, I think that's when we really developed the method for recruiting on the darknet, because at that point, like Christoffer said, no one had really done that before. So we didn't really even know what we were getting into at that point either. So a lot of that was going on to different forums, and as you said, kind of posting a statement about, you know, this is who we are, we're researchers at Karolinska, we have this program, we're here to you know, help you if you're feeling, you know, conflicted about these behaviors that you're doing. And so we would go out, and in the very beginning, I remember that we were just getting kicked out of these forums all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're on these different forums, the whole point is to be anonymous and secure, and it is a group that is committing a crime, and so they're obviously really concerned about the consequences of being caught. So the instant gut reaction is that these people are definitely the police.
Yes. Yeah.
So in the beginning, we really got kicked out, and we learned new ways to kind of go about it. And then over time, we built up a reputation as well, because some people did try it, and then they kind of reported back that it was an actual therapy, that the therapists were actually trying to help them with the behaviors, and they were supportive of them making a change and all of this kind of stuff. So over time, that reputation grew to a point where we started actually getting put on different support communities as a suggestion. And that's helped us so much in Prevent It 2 as well, because when we came back, we actually had, I remember we hadn't even started posting about Prevent It 2, but we opened the website just to kind of check through different things, and there were instantly people signing up because they were like, oh, I missed Prevent It 1 and I've been waiting for this program. So it was kind of amazing that we started at a certain point getting kicked out and all this stuff, to a point where they actually do trust us and our program and our work.
Okay, and definitely reason for you and your team to be proud of that, because you're making great moves in that space.
Yes.
That's such a contrast.
we feel proud, but also at the same time, let's not be naive. I mean, this is not the silver bullet that solves the whole problem. We reach
Right.
out to a couple of hundreds of individuals. There are tens of thousands out there, and so it's a long way to go. And our strategy is working, but it should only be considered as one of many strategies that needs to be implemented. We need to collaborate in society. This should be considered a public health problem. We should like collaborate from on different levels of society with different like authorities and stuff. But this seems as one promising strategy, at least when it comes to prevention.
Well said. Excellent. We need to collaborate as a society. I completely agree. What you just said was very, very powerful. Okay, so when you managed to get somebody onto your program, they come forward and they say, yes, I'd like to interact with it in some way. What happens then?
Okay, yeah. So whenever an individual goes to the website, they can sign up for an interview time. And at that point, they're linked with a therapist. And once they get to their interview, they can have a live chat discussion. So again, the whole point of this program is that we're lowering the barriers to treatment, and we're allowing a completely anonymous therapy. So everything is chat-based or messaging-based on the platform. So whenever they enter into the interview, they're just asked different questions about inclusion and exclusion criteria, but then also about their mental health and about the problems that they've been facing, what they're worried about, their current urges, and that kind of thing. So once they go through this process, they're either included or excluded from the program. And if they're included, we are controlling the study. So it's a cognitive behavioral intervention, CBT, versus a wait list. So they're either randomized into one of those different arms. And once they enter into the CBT therapy, they are given access to the first module. And the treatment itself, it's about 2 months long, so 9 weeks, and the participants get access to new material each week where it's a short video, there's a treatment chapter that they can read through each week, and then they complete different exercises. So throughout the week, they're testing new behaviors, testing new ways to manage their trigger situations or risk situations, and they're reporting back what they've found out works for them, or if they need to adjust things, for example. And once they submit those worksheets, their therapist replies and they can go through and give feedback. So that can be very, validating for the patient to see someone going through their work and validating that the effort that they're putting in, because therapy is a lot of work. So that's really important. And then if the patient is struggling with anything, we can also help in that regard as well.
Amazing. Christoffer, is there anything you'd like to add to that? If there's not, there's no problem.
No, I mean,
another question.
One thing I know that the clients really appreciate is to have a personal therapist to follow them through a 2-month period of their lives in which they've decided to make a change. A professional therapist who is really there for them to make sure that this journey is as efficient and safe as possible. And I know they really appreciate that, and they rate our therapies with very high ratings. So that's good. No, so that's what I could say is maybe that we have other ongoing programs, but we can
okay. But before we move on to those, which I do want to, I know that a large section of my audience will be thinking in their head as they've been listening to us talk so far and being like, you can't change them. You can't rehabilitate them. They will always be evil. What is your immediate response to the large amount of the population that have that approach to this currently?
I can maybe start by
Yeah.
saying that I feel like the patients that we get in, the reason that they want help is because they do feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for looking at a CSAM, for example, or having these urges or thoughts. And the reason that a lot of these behaviors have culminated is because they haven't been able to get help because they felt so much shame and they can't tell their support systems, their family or friends. They feel very alone in these thoughts. And so I think that is why this therapist connection is so important, this therapeutic alliance, because they're actually able to talk with somebody who can give them feedback and actually motivate them to make those changes. Because right now, a lot of the patients that we're seeing, especially if they're coming from these darknet forums, the only people that they've really been able to talk to about these sexual urges or behaviors are people who are also doing them.
Right.
And so they need some sort of support to make those changes in their daily life. And like Christoffer said, this is not the only solution to
Yes.
this problem, but perhaps this can lower some of the barriers for seeking further help even after they go through Prevent It, because they can see, healthcare can support these kind of issues, or we can lower the behaviors or urges enough where they can start getting help for other issues in their life. And that can lead to maintaining the changes that they're making currently.
Okay, so let me just quickly come in here, and then I'd like to pass to Christoffer too on his thoughts on that. Do you think it's useful for us to think about people who either are thinking about offending or have offended in some kind of spectrum, where you have some people who just don't care and will just continue doing what they're doing, even if they see a prison sentence, they're coming out and they're just continuing to try to get away with it? Or you have some people at the other end of the spectrum that recognize they've got something very dangerous in their head and want to do something about it immediately. Now, do you think it's useful if we remind ourselves that we have a, for lack of a better, I don't think spectrum is the correct word, but let's use it just for now. We have a spectrum of people, and that program that you've explained currently is going to really appeal to the people that want to do something about it. And they're an important part of this puzzle, because if we can get them to never give in to the temptation completely, we save this crime from happening to children. Any thoughts, Christoffer?
I think spectrum is a good word. I use it myself to
Okay.
teach students. There is a spectrum from going from very light gray to extremely black,
Right.
and pessimistic. We see them. We see people from all over the spectrum. Let's be honest. I mean, some people like what they're doing. Some people are not troubled at all, and some people enjoy hurting others to the extent that they are not interested in therapy at all. And some are actually ideologically convinced that this is a good thing to do, when they want to propagate this as almost like an idea. They want to convince others about that this is the right thing to do, to hurt children this way. And there are activists in this field too. But if you look at it from another perspective, over a lifetime, most of these individuals, also the ones in the more pessimistic end of the spectrum, have moments in their life, or almost all of them have moments in their lives where they feel that this is maybe not a good thing after all. Not least in the younger years, when they start to discover these thoughts in their mind for the first time, and they understand that I'm a bit different than my friends. I'm still interested in the little girls from at kindergarten, while my friends start to have girlfriends from in the same class, etc. So they start to feel something is a bit odd here. And in the start, there is a window of time. I think we can reach out to these individuals. And I think we need to have that in mind when we design our healthcare for them. And also, if we have done interview studies where we ask them, why do you seek care? Why did you decide to come to us and sign up? And quite often it is that something has happened. You know, someone has caught them having material on their computer. Someone has, you know, the police has knocked on the door or something, or the wife has said, either you go to treatment or I will divorce you. Something, you know, externally has happened. And in that moment of time, they're also quite interested also. And then our studies, they have limitations. We don't have long-term follow-up. We know what happens in a couple of months during the treatment and after, but we don't know what happens like after 5 years or 10 years. Do they relapse?
Wow.
To what extent, etc. And that is an important research question for us to know what happens in the long term. And but I also want to make clear that the ones who seek our help, they're not only the ones who are, you know, maybe thinking about this in an anxious way. We also get the ones who are really, really dangerous to children, that do really, really severe things to children. So just, it's not the same thing. The ones who are most dangerous, who are least interested in treatment, that's not actually the same thing.
Right, okay.
But I also, as a comment to your first question, when I started this program, Prevented, together with Alison and the rest of the team, my assumption was that talk therapy wouldn't be too effective. Actually, I am a bit skeptical to talk therapy with these kinds of problems, at least in the start, because I think sexuality is such a hard thing to change just with talk. Just think of when someone is unfaithful to their partner. They can have all kinds of good moral arguments the whole lifetime, and you can be a good person and still some people are unfaithful, and that is just on a very everyday level. Then imagine being like a serial sex offender against a child. I mean, can words change that? Is that really is that really a realistic thing to think? So that was why we decided to challenge our hypothesis with the most robust and hard scientific challenge as possible. So they were randomized to either our intervention or to a placebo intervention. So we really pushed our research question from as hard as possible. But still, in the end, we found that it was actually effective. Almost half of them quit totally, and the ones who were still active in the end with watching child sexual abuse material, they had gone from like 7 hours a week to maybe 1 hour, and the material they choose was going from extremely severe to in the lighter end of the spectrum. So it really made a change, and I must trust my own. I must trust our own data. So yeah.
Okay. So in some circumstances, let me start again. It would be unrealistic for us to think that we can just stop everybody from doing this immediately. Even just small incremental changes like reducing the amount of hours that they're watching every week, reducing the type of content that they're watching, severity wise, they're all wins. All of them are wins. And if we can just pick up all of these wins along the way, continue picking them up, then we're actually moving forward, instead of just shouting at the computer screen saying, kill them, lock them up, throw away the key. Right, let's be proactive with this. So I'm very pleased and interested in what you're saying. Would you like to talk about, you've mentioned that there are actually other areas apart from the one that we've just discussed in your work. Please, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, this research field is in a very early stage. There's a lot of things to investigate. One of them is what works for whom and when. Some people are helped with cognitive behavioral therapy, as Alison described. We know that. Some are also helped by the pharmaceuticals we test, but we don't have a clear picture who is benefiting the most from what kind of intervention. So that is like an overarching question we have. So therefore, we test different kinds of interventions in different populations and different cultural landscapes and different comorbidities, etc. So we have a number of clinical trials ongoing now to investigate this. So we test 3 different kinds of more psychotherapeutically based programs. One is what Alison described, another is based on self-help, and a third on motivation interviewing. Then we test different kinds of combinations of pharmaceuticals too, to see, to tailor the treatment as good as possible. And in order to not have that nowadays quite common situation where someone seeks help and then they go through different kinds of interventions, and it can take years before they find what is actually working. And maybe by that time they have been demotivated and lost hope in healthcare. So we want to, being able to recommend the best thing from the start.
Yes.
That is something we're working quite much with.
Okay. The pharmaceutical side of it. Can we talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, sure. What we have discovered in our group is that certain kind of pharmaceutical that works by quickly reducing the levels of testosterone is very efficient in reducing the risk for child sexual abuse and repeated child sexual abuse. And the medicine works in just 1 or 2 days. You have almost non-detectable levels of testosterone left after only 1 injection, because it is an injection. And then after 2 weeks, the risk has reduced significantly. And the higher risk you had from the start, the more effective the medicine is. And then the risk continues to reduce the longer the pharmaceutical can work. 1 injection lasts 3 to 4 months. You don't need to repeat the injection. And in the end of that period, the risk is actually quite low for committing child sexual abuse. And what is good in all of this is that when you ask the participant how they felt, what they subjectively experienced from the treatment, they are very positive. A majority want to repeat the injection because they feel it has helped them in their private lives so much. And and they would like to recommend it to others. And what they feel is most helpful with the injection for their own sake is that their hypersexuality, their almost compulsive and obsessive thoughts around sex reduces to a manageable level. And also actually the sexual interest in children itself wanes off to the level that they don't feel that they are that they can see a child walking down the street and not having sexual thoughts around it. So it was very good news when the results were available, of course, and it has been. I now get letters from all over the world that they use this medicine especially for the high risk individuals. And so that's one pharmaceutical.
Okay, so why? The question that comes to my mind is why do we or would we use that injection as the first step for everyone? As soon as you come forward, you take the injection, because yes. Would that even be a conversation? Would that even be something?
It's a very good thought, and that was the design in that particular trial, and it worked really well. And but the thing is, then you need to have someone showing up at the clinic, showing their ID card and saying, I would like help and I have sexual interest in children. And of course, I mean, it should always be a dialogue between the doctor and the client, and they should have the opportunity to say no and to be suggested something else, etc., etc. But I think with that kind of treatment in the background, then you can add psychotherapy and you can add different things, but it makes you feel calm as a therapist and as a doctor if you know that this is working in the background.
Yes. Okay. Alison, is there anything you'd like to say or have to say on this pharmaceutical side of things?
I think that the studies that Christoffer has been doing with that has been amazing. And I'm really excited because I know that there's another one in the works where they're going to look at different combinations to see about testing this in a more long-term way. And I think that that has the potential to have some real big impact because, like Christoffer said, I think even in Prevent It, we get participants who are asking about medical options and where they can maybe come and get those kind of interventions, but they're just not widely available right now. So I think that the more research we do on these things and the more availability that there is, the better that the treatment outcome is going to be. And one of the other things that Christoffer said that I really agree with is that even therapy and looking at different risk factors and trying to decrease the risk to give in to certain urges. Those exercises can be so much more effective if someone does have some type of medication that is changing their urge level. And we see that even in working with, someone with a high amount of depression, if they take an antidepressant for a certain period of time, then they go and they do the psychological component of going to therapy. They actually have the energy and the ability to do that work. And we see that with our patients sometimes. The urges are too high or the hypersexuality traits are too high that they find it difficult because everything is triggering.
Right.
So the ability to take that down and then put in the work could be really amazing.
Okay, so we have two methods here: the therapy and the medication, and in some situations the combination of both will be fantastic, but there are complications in the pharmaceutical side because the person actually has to come forward in person, not just behind the computer screen. That's the next level of progression for that person on this journey. Can I ask about any limitations that your work faces with regards to the ages of people, the people who you are approaching you, if they are under 18, over 18, does that add any complications?
I would say in Prevent It, we only allow patients who are 18 or older. And we have had to exclude a few individuals because they've come to us under the age of 18. And so that's kind of unfortunate because you don't want to exclude anyone who is seeking help. But I think that we've been trying to look into the possibilities of creating a program that could maybe be for individuals under 18, because that is where a large portion of child sexual abuse happens, is from persons under the age of teen, maybe around like from 15 to 18. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. And to try to get some form of information into schools, I think would be a great achievement for us. I don't think schools would be anywhere near, or in my experience of visiting schools, would be anywhere near ready to have a conversation to their students about their harmful sexual behavior in what they're doing or in their mind. I don't think they're ready for that in my experience from visiting schools. It's all about, the discussion is all about what to do if you're been sexually abused. And my frustrations are huge with that because it's very reactive. It's you know what I mean, and I'm pulling my hair out with it all at the moment with schools. I mean, yeah, let me just ask you the question. Have you ever thought about schools at all?
Yeah, I think it should be possible to go to your school nurse and talk about these things. That is one aspect of the discussion around stigma, that of course it should be extremely black and white when it comes to the norms regarding sexual violence. It should be totally clear to everyone that there are no gray scales in between, that all of sexual violence is wrong, but it should be allowed and accepted to go and talk to someone if you have impulses around that. So if a school nurse or people who meet in child and adolescent psychiatry clients that seek their help for some sorts, and they start to talk about these things, it should be totally normal to, you know, recommend them some kind of preventative interventions, or just to have a quick checkup with an adult to talk about these things. I cannot see why they don't do it. But yeah.
Yes, we will continue pushing forward. Hey, so we talked about two areas of your work: pharmaceutical side and therapy side. Are there any other elements of it you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, we do all kinds of research actually around this. We also do brain imaging, for example, to try
Oh,
to see
fascinating.
the
Yeah.
neurological basis of child sexual interest and pedophilia. What does it come from? Because most of our clients say, I did not choose this. I mean, I just discovered it when I entered puberty. So where did it come? Where does it come from? So we try to map out and find neurological background to pedophilia. And we see there are indications that this has maybe been established already from a very early age. Could be even from the time of birth, something around there, to see what actually leads up to pedophilia. Yeah, so that is another branch of our research.
Okay, so you, with the brain scans, you then have to have people come in so you can scan, or okay.
Yep.
And you are seeing any commonalities, or I mean, this is really interesting. So what are you seeing in these brain scans, or are you seeing anything?
Yes, we've published a few studies around that, and there are a few in pipeline too. But there seem to be like a brain signature correlating to pedophilia that is not linked to other things they also have, such as depression and autism problems and other, you know, criminal thoughts. It seems to be actually linked to the pedophilia itself, and that is really interesting.
Okay. Can you, just for myself actually, and the audience, can you give us, when you say pedophilia, is that a diagnosis? Is that a definition? What's the information around that particular word?
When I say pedophilia, I refer to pattern of sexual urges involving prepubescents.
Okay.
And you need to be adult yourself, and the children should not have entered puberty. And you have had that for like a couple of years at least. But that is not in the diagnostic manual. You can have that without having a diagnosis of pedophilic disorder or something. It is when it is combined with suffering or impulses of acting out or actual offenses. That is when you can label it with a psychiatric diagnosis, and you call it pedophilic disorder.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there are a few
Okay.
important distinctions there.
And that's useful for us, because the more I do this work, the more I have seen and been shown that the terminology we use is extremely important. Like when I first started doing this work, I would use the word child porn. I was ignorant to what that actually meant, or the proper definition behind it, and so now I use CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. So that's important for us. So we're all trying to learn as we go. Alison, anything you'd like to say about the brain scans or that area of the project?
I'm not involved with
Yeah.
the brain scan part of the projects, but I think that it is really interesting, and I think it's going to lead to a lot of interesting discoveries as well.
I agree with you completely. And I think that the research that you're doing around the brain scans is great for us to see that actually there's something for some people, there's actually something going wrong or malfunctioning up in the brain, and it makes it very serious. It's not just like somebody wakes up one morning and decides that actually this is what they want to do. You know, for some people, it's something that's been festering for a long time, and maybe we need to start thinking about helping or supporting that, or working with that person to ensure that they never commit the crime. It's so difficult because the words that we use are so triggering for people. Just these words that I just used there: supporting, helping. are two words I used to use initially. And I've actually stopped using those words because people don't want to hear it. People don't want to help. People don't want to support. People don't want any money thrown at these people. People don't want to see centers built for these people. People don't want to see therapists working with these people. So actually, I use just the word working with now. So I don't use the help. I don't use the support because, you know, on my platform, sometimes I get huge backlash for showing any empathy. Right. That's what I get a lot of backlash from. And I don't think it is me showing empathy. I think it's me understanding that our goal is to get to these people before they commit the crime. Celebrating once we've found out the crime and putting these people in prison and like that being some kind of celebration as if we achieve something, I think is completely incorrect. Like, if we're going to celebrate when the crime has been found out and we've got this person in prison, in my eyes, we're late. We're late to the situation there. So it's not a celebration. It must be a reminder that we're not getting there quick enough. Do you also have to be very careful with your terminology when you speak to the general public or on forums about this work?
I would say, because I completely agree with you, there are different levels of prevention. And, you know, when you're working with primary prevention, and you touched on this already a little bit, but when you're working with that primary prevention, trying to stop sexual violence before it occurs and by addressing, you know, root causes or risk factors, that is going to be things like educational programs in the schools, like you mentioned, community outreach, working with legislation, like those kind of different things. And our program, it kind of goes across different levels of prevention. So because we also reach out to individuals who have already acted in some sort of way on their sexual urges. But we are also targeting that primary prevention before an act occurs as well, because our ultimate goal is to try to reach these individuals before anything occurs. And I think a big part of that is exactly what you say, is having some sort of support in place, having these education programs that are decreasing the stigma of getting help, because that's one of the reasons why people will avoid reaching out to healthcare before committing a crime, because if it goes on long enough and they are feeling the stigma, they're feeling worried about getting reported or anything, if they reach out to healthcare, then they're just going to keep going until their urges might get too high, their curiosity gets too high, and then they start engaging with these sexual urges because they feel alone and lost and all of those very uncomfortable feelings. So if we can decrease some of the stigma for getting help early before anything occurs, then we can potentially prevent a lot of sexual violence.
So powerful. Thank you so much. Could we talk a little bit about your vision for the future, please? I think that would be very interesting to hear what you're thinking of coming up, what you've got coming up, where you're trying to take things, and where you see yourself moving forward year on year.
What I would like to establish in society is the view that this is a public health problem, that we need to collaborate in society, different authorities, different view on things, and different actions involving private sector, tech companies, social media companies, and also I hope we get attention from politicians in that way, and that we place this on a level where we believe it is preventable, but without any naivety, without any empty words. Let's do this in a proper way, and let's dedicate the resources that matches the level of the problem to, because I don't think there is a general view among decision makers. They don't seem to really understand either how severe this problem is, how common it is, how many people that are hurt, maybe with lifelong consequences, and they don't seem to really understand that this is something we can do something about. And it takes international collaborations too, but it is not impossible at all. I think there are some positive now indications that it seems to be an awakening among decision makers, at least in Europe and in the European Union. And I hope they have the courage and the perseverance to reach a result in this. And that is what I would like to achieve.
Excellent, Christoffer. Oh, you're just so encouraging. That's so encouraging. Alison, and yourself, your work within this work, your where you'd like to see it go, or the vision that you and your team have for the future.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I second everything that Christoffer just said. I think everything that we have been working towards with this research group, it's been an amazing process because we have expanded into so many different areas and into so many different types of research over even just the last 5 years that I've been working in this group. And that's amazing to see because I do feel very hopeful that we are able to start targeting these issues from a lot of different perspectives. And I think that is kind of what I'm seeing us continuing on to do, is looking at especially with the prevention of sexual violence, trying to target it from a lot of different perspectives and accessing different levels of that prevention. So looking at the primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention options, and learning more about all of the different factors that lead toward sexual violence, and how, as Christoffer said, how we can actually do a proper risk analysis for individuals and help them come in contact with the intervention that would be most effective for them, I think is so important.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And I can also add, if you zoom out to the big perspective and maybe put it in an historical context as well, I think when we look back on the time we're in now, like in 10 or 20 years from now, and we look back what happened during these years when all these initiatives and research projects were running and we were discussing these things. I think that one major achievement from what we're doing now is that we understand that it is possible to do this work with an intact ethical with the sound ethics based on humanistic values, and we don't need to leave anyone behind. We don't need to give up on anyone. That includes, but then we need to work together in society, all from prisons to forensic psychiatry, from specialized clinic to private sector, and we need to collaborate, but then we can do this. We can actually do this, and I think we have understood that now, that we don't need to give up on our basic ethics around our view on people.
Amazing. So encouraging. I just want to thank you both for your time today, explaining your work. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I feel privileged to be able to have this conversation with you and bring it to my audience, because we're all after the same goal, preventing this crime in the first place. Christoffer, could you just tell my audience where they can find the work, any websites or anything that they should go to, please?
Yes, you can just Google, if you write Project Bridge and e-therapy, for example, or Prevent It and e-therapy, you find these, all the links you need. You can access the programs from wherever in the world you are, but you can also go to a webpage called helplinks.eu. There you find all resources in all countries that are now available, including our programs, but also other programs in the same spirit.
Brilliant. And we will put all of those links in the show notes, including links to Christoffer and Alison if you need to reach out to them too. And I want to say thank you to both of you for featuring on this podcast. Thank you to everybody that's listening or watching on YouTube for joining me. I hope you found that as interesting and informative as I did. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I wonder how you felt about that podcast episode. What great information and what great ways of thinking that this Prevent It program have with Christoffer and Alison. I was actually really pleased with that conversation because I thought it was just so productive, well spoken, great information, as I said, and a great resource and so much food for thought. It will give us so much to think about moving forward. I am trying to evolve this conversation I am trying to take it places where I've never seen it taken before, and I hope that you support me in that. So thank you so much for joining me on this podcast episode, and I'll see you again for another one soon. Thank you.